the mezuzah at the beginning of the class, and we'll speak more about its significance at the end of the section. And now we're going through the different areas. Welcome, Reb Moshe from Israel. Nice to have you here. So we spoke about how the mitzvah applies to every door frame. And just to give a quick summary, even to the city gates that lead towards the homes, we said it goes on the right side. Where to position the mezuzah, we spoke all about that. How to fix it, and how to make a bracha. Adjacent doorways, and now we come up to what happens if you want to hide your mezuzah. You're in an area where you are afraid that the mezuzah will be stolen or vandalized. How do you go about that? So we'll start off by learning about that. That is in subsection halacha 9.
9, yeah.
Okay. So in a place where you suspect that people might steal the mezuzah, if possible, you should make a groove in the doorpost of the house and place the mezuzah in it. But don't make the groove deeper than a tefach, which we said is about 10 centimeters, a hand's breadth, because then the mezuzah would not be on the doorpost of your house, but it would be in the doorpost. But the Torah says, al mezuzot beitecha. It should be on the doorpost, not in the doorpost. But if it's within a hand's width, a hand's breadth, 10 centimeters from the doorpost, then it's still considered on the doorpost, but not in the doorposts. You should also be careful that in all circumstances, the place of the mezuzah should be distinct. You cannot possibly cut out the part of the doorpost of the house. In this situation, you can fix the mezuzah inside the house behind the door, meaning the mezuzah belongs outside the door, so you can see it from the street. But if it's impossible to cut out a carving to put the mezuzah into the doorpost, and your mezuzah will be stolen or it's dangerous, then you would be allowed to put it on the inside of the door under those circumstances. But only on the doorpost itself, not on the wall of the house. And the mezuzah should not be distanced more than a tefach from the doorway opening, because then it would be invalid. Again, it should be within approximately 10 centimeters of the opening. So the Medalis actually on Curry Street, if you're going on a walk, you'll see that they did that. If you look by the pedestrian gate over there on the right-hand side, you won't notice a mezuzah, but if you look really closely, so they carved out into the cement a space for a mezuzah, and put the mezuzah and cemented, and just left a little eye hole around the actual shin of the mezuzah. So when you're right there, you can actually see the mezuzah through the eye hole, but it's completely inside of the lintel. So that's fine. So if you try to hide the mezuzah, that can be done. Or if you're into construction, you could actually carve out, or you're a carpenter, you could carve a space for the mezuzah within the door frame, provided it's not more than 10 centimeters deep. That's an interesting one. Okay, and now we move on to the size. A house is not required to have a mezuzah unless it has the dimensions of 4 amos by 4 amos. So an amma is about half a meter. So unless it has about 2 meters by 2 meters. If there are no dimensions of 4 amos by 4 amos, but there is equivalent area of the square of 4 amos, meaning if you don't have 2 meters by 2 meters, but you do have 4 square meters, so that would be, for example, it might be a walk-in closet. You might have a walk-in closet. If it's a smallish walk-in closet, it's not 2 meters wide, but it's more than 2 meters long. And so if you take the entire area in total, you have more than 4 square meters. He says that's actually a debate. Some maintain that it is required of mezuzah, and some don't. So practically what that means is you would put up a mezuzah without making a bracha, or you would put up the mezuzah after making a bracha on another doorway that definitely requires a mezuzah. So that's as far as room size. Let's now talk about how you define a doorway. So when you're going past Jewish homes, sometimes you see a mezuzah outside the gate, and sometimes you don't. So it could be that sometimes a mezuzah is required and sometimes it's not. Let's see what the definitions are. A doorway does not require a mezuzah unless it has two doorposts, which have the minimal height of 10 tfachim, which is approximately a meter high, because we said a hand's breadth is about 10 centimeters, and a lintel above them. So, I mean, Terry, you were asking earlier about a midget. This doorway is pretty short. It's only a meter high. The moment a doorway is more than a meter high, if it has two posts on the side and a lintel across the top, then it requires a mezuzah. Even if the doorposts were not of wood or stones, but rather the walls of the structure itself serve as a doorpost, and there was a ceiling on top of them, a mezuzah is also required. Okay, so I don't know if we'll be able to draw this because it's a little bit complex. Let's try. Okay, so we have over here.
Rabbi, just a question. In
Yeah.
my book, it looks like this drawing's upside down.
I think it is. I think it was a mistake.
Okay.
Okay. So in this first scenario, we have over here, say this is the home. Okay. Okay, so you have over here your you have over here your house. So and then there's a roof. Okay, so let's say this is now the entrance at the front over here. So what you have is there's no wall over here. No, actually, we're talking about a different scenario. Let's clarify it. We'll get to that scenario soon. Okay, this is the scenario we're dealing with. There is a wall, but there's no lintel on top of the wall. Okay, so this over here is the doorway in the middle. Okay. So that's your doorway. So there's no lintel, but the roof comes to the ends. So you have a wall on the side. You have a little short wall over there, or however large the wall is, depending on the house. And you have another wall over here. And then you have the doorway in between. So that would require a mezuzah because although there's no lintel in place, you do still have the equivalent because you have a post on the right side, which is coming from that wall. And you have a post on the left side, which is coming from that wall. And then the roof forms the lintel on top. Okay. But let's actually, before we deal with this case, let's first discuss one other case that comes up even before that. Let's say there was a wall on top as well. So then this is a regular doorway. So for starters, what he's saying is that even if you don't install an actual wooden frame, but you simply have brickwork with an opening in the middle, then that would for sure require a mezuzah. That would be, I guess, the first point to mention. The second point to mention would be even if there isn't brickwork on top here, rather, there's nothing on top, there's just a roof on top, but you have a wall on either side, you still have what's called a doorway, and so you still would be requiring a mezuzah. Okay. How do we get out of here? You share. Okay. So rather, the walls of the structure itself serve as a doorpost, and there was a ceiling on top of them, so a mezuzah is required. If a house had only one doorpost, for instance, when on one side a wall extends as a perpendicular from a side wall, as illustrated in this diagram. If the extension is from the left side, a mezuzah is not required. But if the extension is from the right side, there is a question if a mezuzah is required. Therefore, the mezuzah should be put up without a bracha or after putting up another mezuzah. Okay, so this last scenario, let's see if we could draw it up. We'll give it a try. Go back to our whiteboard. Okay, so this last scenario is where, this is going to be tough. I might go beyond my drawing skills. So the wall actually get rid of that. The wall actually turned inwards. And I went like that. Okay, get the idea. Okay, you see what it is. Just look at the top, not the bottom. So the wall's turned inwards. So now when you're walking in the house, when you're walking in the house, sorry. When you walk down this way, through that gap over there, so you have a wall on your right side, and you have, that's basically the scenario. So when you're walking into this scenario, there is a doorpost over there, but on the left, there's no doorpost, there's just a wall. So we say in such a scenario, you should put up a mezuzah without a bracha. If it was the reverse, if I was able to flip this picture now, and this wall, this short wall, would actually be not on your right side, but on your left side, then you definitely would not be required to have a mezuzah, because on the right side, there would be no post altogether because it's the middle of the wall. By the way, I have this exact scenario in 2 or 3 places on my property. So it's actually very common where you'll have on the one side a post, and on the other side, the wall just continues. So we say
this is exactly what this picture that I was asking you about is showing.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Terry.
So you see it there on the one side, you see where the mezuzah is, and on the other side, there would be no mezuzah.
Correct. So, yeah, in such a scenario, you would, if it's on your right, you'll put up a mezuzah without a bracha. If it's on your left, then you will not be required a mezuzah altogether. Okay. That takes us to section number 12. If the doorway has 2 doorposts without a lintel, but there is above them an arched top, like a bow, or even if there are no doorposts at all, but rather the arch itself extends upwards from the ground in a curve. So that if you have an archway, simply round, so does it require a mezuzah? Because you don't really have separate posts and a lintel. And we said the definition of a doorpost is that it needs to have 2 posts and a lintel, but you don't have that. So he says, if the entrance has a height of 10 tfachim, about a meter high, and a width of 4 tfachim, and about 40 centimeters wide, so then it does require a mezuzah. In the case of stores, where one doorpost is made to reach from the ground until the lintel, and the other doorpost that does not reach until the lintel, but rather the wall above the post is cut out approximately an amma or more, as illustrated in the diagram. Terry, maybe you could show it to us.
Yeah.
Okay, do you see that? Okay, so if it's keep it there for a moment, Terry. If it's on the right-hand side, then you would put up a mezuzah. Okay. If it's on the well, in the first scenario where it's a straight wall on the right, that's simple. But if on the right-hand side actually goes in, the question is, where do you put your mezuzah? So what we'll describe is, if this wall at the bottom is more than 10 tvachim high, you would put the mezuzah onto that little piece. If not, you would move in and put it at the end. And in a moment, I'll show you a picture that I just took in my house now of, I think, exactly that scenario. And based on revising these halachos now, I actually have a question if the mezuzah in my house is actually in the wrong place. So let's take a look at that. Let's just read it inside. If the doorpost which extends to the roof, to the lintel, is to the right of the entrance, the mezuzah is placed on that doorpost. If the smaller doorpost is on the right side of the entry, then if it's 10 tvachim high, the mezuzah is placed on it. And if it is not 10 tvachim high, which we said is about a meter high, it is affixed to the wider part of the wall. So let me try to pull up this example, just a moment. Here we go. Where are we? Here we go. So if you've been to my house, you would recognize this. So here we have an entranceway to my house, and I have the mezuzah up there on the right. But based on this information, I took a tape measure, and I measured that this metal gate over here, which we put up so the kids don't fall down, is actually a meter high. So seemingly, based on what we've just learned, the mezuzah should actually be over here on the banister, on the edge, rather than being up there on the wall. But I'm not going to make changes to the mezuzah until I bounce this off some larger halachic authorities, and I will get back to you on that. I just thought it'll be interesting to make this practical. This is really seemingly the scenario that you're dealing with over here, where the wall is going inwards. So do you put the mezuzah by the banister, or do you put it all the way at the end? Okay, back to okay. Okay, so as far as the door first, so this is quite interesting. If you're doing some renovations and you're wondering exactly when to put your mezuzahs up, so there are some halachic authorities who maintain that even if there's no door, it still requires a mezuzah, which means practically if you have a lintel and a post, then even if there's no door, you still put up a mezuzah. And on the Torah Academy campus, there's like this artwork of about, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20 archways before you walk into the main campus. And there's about 20 mezuzahs in a tiny area because they're each doorways, although they don't have doors, but they're all doorways. If you have that kind of artwork of lots of doorways leading up to an area, then all require mezuzah. Just to clarify on one other relevant point, as far as your properties, as far as your entranceways to the property, so if you have like our gate to my house, there's no lintel across the top. So then the gate would not require a mezuzah on the side because there's only a post and there's no lintel. But if you have, like many of the properties have today, some kind of frame that runs over the gate, then you have a doorway. You have a lintel and a post on the lintel, so that would require a mezuzah. So just to finish this up, because I see we've reached 5:20, so in halacha 13, he says that if you will be putting up a door, first put up the door and then put up the mezuzah. Because until the door's up, some opinions say you don't need a mezuzah. And if you're going to first put up the mezuzah and then put up the door, it goes like what we learned about the tzitzis. You don't want to do a mitzvah in a backwards way. You don't want it to become a kosher mezuzah because you put up the door. Rather, first put up the door and then put the mezuzah on it. So wait till your doors are up before you put up your mezuzahs. But that said, if you want to take your door down and put it back up, that wouldn't cause any issues to the mezuzah. Thank you for joining us.
Wait.
And yes.
If you're looking in the history of Israelites,